Tonight on Q2, Allen's Law.
Our caregiving workforce needs to be vetted. We have to be comfortable when we pay a stranger to come in and take care of our loved ones.
A bill motivated by a Billings homicide case moves to the Montana Senate at the legislature. Plus, off the tracks.
Are we doing enough to protect this really important, iconic river in our community?
Monday's train derailment involving 24 coal cars now has environmental groups raising the alarm.
You can do it.
And an all-American on and off the stage.
My biggest dream, honestly, is to be on Broadway.
A Wyoming student set to make school history by capturing a prestigious honor. The MTN 10 o'clock news starts right now.
From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Well, good evening and thanks for joining us on this Wednesday night. I'm Russ Riesinger. New tonight, a lawsuit will soon be filed against a Billings man accused of sexually abusing several kids at the Boys and Girls Ranch. This as a bill moves forward in the state legislature aimed at protecting some of the most vulnerable from victimization. As our David J. reports, that legislation is motivated by another Billings case where a group home worker beat a patient to death last February.
The bill in the legislature would bring an enhanced penalty for an offense against a vulnerable person at a caregiver facility. The motivation for the law came from an incident in Billings about a year ago, and if passed, it would be called Allen's Law. Alan Wright was beaten by a group home worker last February.
There are a subpopulation of people that they enjoy hurting people. They are career predators.
Kelvin Kelton is the executive director of Residential Support Services, which has closed the home where the homicide happened.
The person who died in our services, he was not only nonverbal, he had the IQ about of a 2-year-old, and he was nonverbal to the extent he couldn't cry for help.
Dante Garriott, who was 19 at the time, will soon be tried for deliberate homicide in the death of Wright, who was 37. Kelton says background checks do not always reveal past offenses. That would change if Senate Bill 296 becomes law.
Without this law, someone could abuse someone and go to court, plead down as a misdemeanor, be released, and then they go working in another location because there's no record, no felony record.
State Senator Mike Yakowicz is the sponsor of the bill and visited with Kelton to come up with Allen's Law.
Cal and I and all of us want to pass this bill and name it after him.
Last week, Timothy Westervelt was charged with felony and misdemeanor offenses related to child sexual assault at the Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch.
They, were put into this facility as a troubled youth, and then instead of getting help and treatment as they were promised and their families were promised, they were abused.
Cassidy West of AVA Law Group represents clients who have been at the ranch and says abuse in group homes is a nationwide problem and the responsibility lies with the offending worker and management.
It's our intent to file civil complaints against these, not only the perpetrators, but also against the facilities, and hold them at least economically responsible for what they've done to these people.
And they all say Senate Bill 296 will solve only part of the problem.
Really what's going to solve the problem is when people learn to care about one another again. Hopefully that happens.
In Billings, David J., MTN News.
Cigar lounges have been popping up across Montana, and now new legislation is looking to make them more accessible. Senate Bill 150, proposed by Republican Senator Wiley Galt of Martinsdale, would allow cigar bar owners to open their doors to the public with the appropriate licensing endorsement. Those businesses would have to pay a $200 per year fee and be required to report annually to the Department of Public Health and Human Services. The licensing endorsement would only be issued to a licensee who can also sell liquor, beer, and wine, and only cigars purchased from the lounge could be smoked on the premises. The lounges would also have to have a ventilation system and humidor for the cigars. The bill, which passed the Senate, now moves to the House before heading to the governor's desk. Property taxes were also a major topic discussion at the legislature today, with the Montana House and Senate each giving initial approval to multiple tax relief bills. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian breaks down some of the proposals still moving forward.
On Wednesday, Montana lawmakers endorsed some of the key legislative proposals aimed at giving Montana residents a break on their property taxes. But there's still a long way to go before we'll see the full final picture of what the legislature's property tax plan is going to look like.
This is a difficult problem to make work.
The House advanced 3 bills Wednesday, including House Bill 231, the homestead bill that's been Governor Greg Gianforte's top property tax priority.
So, is this bill perfect? No, I wish I could have figured out how to do a perfect bill. I don't know how. It does do good work.
HB 231 would give preferential tax rates to Montanans' primary residences, long-term rentals, and smaller business properties. And it's now been amended to tie it to House Bill 154, which would provide a tax credit for homeowners and renters based on their income. Democratic leaders explained their support for linking the bills when speaking to reporters earlier this week.
I think many legislators want to see more than one bill continue and not just have one thing be the final thing, and we all just say that's fine. And so this is kind of our way of forcing conversation, you could say.
The House also endorsed House Bill 155, which would reduce residential property's share of the property tax burden. The Senate advanced 2 bills of its own. One, Senate Bill 90, got unanimous support and applause. SB 90 would use some of the money from taxes on rental cars, hotels, and campgrounds to fund property tax relief for Montana residents. The Senate also advanced SB 32, which would reduce the tax rate on most types of property, but increase it on residential properties that aren't owner-occupied. Gianforte has repeatedly called for the legislature to move the homestead bill quickly, so homeowners can get relief from it this year. But this week, Senate President Matt Regier told reporters he expected lawmakers would take their time looking at all of the different property tax concepts.
I think there's going to be a roundtable conversation that happens at the end for property taxes. That's just my crystal ball.
Each of the bills that advanced on Wednesday will have to pass a final vote before moving over to the other chamber. In Helena, Jonathan Amberian, MTN News.
The Trump administration has already laid off many federal workers who were in their first year of employment. Now tonight, President Donald Trump warns more government workers will soon be fired, saying they're taking steps to begin deep cuts to employees with more tenure. The announcement came as he held the first cabinet meeting of his second term, with the president questioning whether many on the payroll even exist. Government agency heads received a memo this afternoon instructing them to submit reorganization plans by March 13th that include the large-scale reductions in force. Elon Musk spoke at length during the meeting, addressing the Department of Government Efficiency's coordination with agencies to make job cuts.
We wish to keep everyone who is doing a job that is essential and doing that job well. But if the job is not essential or they're not doing the job well, they obviously should not be on the public payroll.
Well, Trump said some agencies will have their own versions of DOGE, which could carry out even more cuts, with the Environmental Protection Agency possibly cutting as much as 65% of its staff. The cleanup continues from Monday night's train derailment on private property just west of Miles City. We now know that derailment sent 25 coal-carrying cars off the tracks, with some dangling over the Yellowstone River. However, according to BNSF, none of those cars actually fell into the river. It remains unclear if any of the coal from the train spilled into the water or when those tracks will be back open. Well, despite not having a lot of information right now, one environmental group is already voicing some concerns. As our Haley Monaco reports, they say it's always dangerous for any species in the river when coal is spilled in or near the banks of the water.
A car full of coal is 200,000 pounds, so that's a lot of material potentially that's in the river.
25 train cars hauling coal derailed near Miles City Monday night, right next to the Yellowstone River.
The main effect is the sediments, so that the dust from that coal gets into the aquatic system. It can cover organisms. It also can affect their reproduction, their longevity.
It has not been made public yet how much, if any, coal was spilled into the Yellowstone River from this train derailment, but seeing a second derailment along the river in just 2 years is cause for concern for Kehan Ostavar.
Are we doing enough to protect this really important, iconic river in our community?
I first met Ostavar in 2023 at the Reed Point train derailment. As the director of the Yellowstone River Research Center and professor of environmental science, he cares deeply about the river and the impact from these events.
This is the second train wreck that's happened in a week in eastern Montana, and it's the fourth major hydrocarbon disaster that's happened on the Yellowstone River since the Exxon oil spill in 2011.
Last summer alone, his team cleaned up thousands of pounds of spillage from the Reed Point train derailment.
We found about 2,000 pounds of material last summer that we removed. That includes the asphalt, also includes sulfur and aluminum scrap.
Obviously, having a locomotive or cars of any type go in to a river of any type is going to affect habitat and local water quality impacts.
Guy Allsensor is the executive director of Upper Missouri Waterkeeper, an organization dedicated to protecting rivers.
Coal being dumped into waterways, that pollutes water quality, it harms habitat, and makes it less likely that our waterways will support the things that we care about, that we all care about: fishable, swimmable, drinkable water.
Allsensor says steps need to be taken to prevent derailments.
Let's invest in meaningful strategies and engineering practices to know where we got degraded infrastructure. Let's clean it up, let's fix it, and let's get on with it. What are the reasonable steps that we can take to not just mitigate this, but to reduce, if not eliminate, these things from happening? Because our rivers can only handle so much.
In Billings, Haley Monaco, MTN News.
It may be warm now, but last week's cold spell still being felt, at least by one Livingston business. The Yellowstone Gateway Museum suffered a burst pipe during the deep freeze and sustained serious water damage. That museum will be closed until further notice while they work to make it a safe environment. But right now, it's the warmth and wind causing the issues. With more on that, here's Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh.
Biggest areas of concern right now, areas with ice jams along the Yellowstone from around Glendive northward, areas where we could see localized flooding across much of north central and northeastern Montana, and strong winds down the East Mountain slopes north of Great Falls. Everything in the northern half of the state, quieter weather for us, but we will have some periods of wind. Take a look out towards Livingston. Heading into tomorrow, we could see some 40 to 55 mile per hour wind gusts, but likely Big Timber, you're going to be the winner on the wind speed category for tomorrow. We could easily see some gusts pushing up closer to 60 degrees region wide. And along with that, once we lose the wind, we'll hang on to the warm in the short term. But once we get into early next week, that's rain switching to snow and much cooler temperatures.
Two Billings nonprofits are joining forces in hopes of strengthening senior services. Big Sky Senior Services and the Adult Resource Alliance of Yellowstone County have agreed to merge and combine resources in order to create a stronger, more comprehensive support system for the county's aging population. The partnership will enhance efforts to address critical challenges such as housing, transportation, in-home care, food security, and elder abuse prevention. The merger is expected to be smooth, with all current programs and services remaining in place without disruption.